Of course, we've done it before. Remember, most of it was that morning, but we're going to continue over till Sunday night too. So that morning, a lot of our youth be involved in singing, and then that night, Brother Jacob be preaching for us. And so come, make sure you're here, support him as he does that. And then show up February the 5th. And then the Allen family will be with us to February the 19th. Of course, I told the preacher, I was like, oh, you only get like a week buffer zone from them, right? Because that's who they're with. And then they get a break from each other for a week, and then they'll be out here. And it's not on here. Ms. Beverly, if I think about it next week, I'll put it on the prayer page next week. But the Berean Sunday School class, how do I say it? The older Sunday School class? Is that the politically right way to say it? Yeah, if you're in the Sunday school class where your next promotion is heaven, they're having to get together February the 11th. Be here at the church. It'd be, and there's a sign-up sheet, February 11th at 5:30. I think I saw bean, soup, cornbread, ham. I think Brother Mike said ham will be here. So if you're a part of this Sunday school class, and you would like to come to that, it's not on here, but that'd be February 11th, and then there's a sign-up sheet in the foyer as well, so be here for that. Well, let's sing one more time. If you like the hymnal, grab it. Let's stand. Page 363, first class, and Jesus saves. We have heard the joyful sound. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Spread the tidings all around. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Bear the news to every land, like the saints that cross the waves. Onward 'tis our Lord's command. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Hear the winds, the mighty voice. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Let the nations now rejoice. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Shout salvation full and free. Highest hills and deepest caves. This our song of victory. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Good singing. That's it. 2 verses. Good singing. You can make it seated tonight. Ella's trying to get me to sing more. I don't know what's up with that. If you got your Bibles, you can turn to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 4 is where we'll be tonight. 2 Kings chapter 4. Ella, I just embarrassed you, didn't I? I embarrassed you. Not too bad. Not as bad as Miss Beverly calling you short. Too bad. 2 Kings chapter 4. We'll start in verse 1. Jake's making me nervous. He's sneaking up behind me. Of course, if you've been here the past few Wednesday nights, of course, we've been doing this for a while now. Probably a year, maybe even a couple of years, been looking at different characters in the Bible, just going through Old Testament. We'll probably even eventually get to the New Testament. And the past couple of weeks, y'all have looked at Elisha, and we'll continue to look at him for the next few weeks, and we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about Elisha and a weeping widow tonight. Of course, if you're familiar with Elisha and his story, this is probably a familiar story to you, because this is one of the more familiar ones. So 2 Kings chapter 4, we'll start in verse 1 and read down to verse 7. The Bible says, Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, Thy servant, my husband, is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons, and to be bondmen. And Elisha said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in thy house? And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in thy house save a pot of oil. I'm sorry, I said oil. I'm from Alabama. Oil, a pot of oil, if that's better for y'all. Verse 3, Then he said, Go borrow the vessels abroad of all the neighbors, even empty vessels borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee, upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, Bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, There is not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. And she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go sell the oil and pay the debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest. So, Elisha and the weeping widow. So here's what's going on in 2 Kings. We have Elisha. He's come across a woman who, for just lack of better words, she has fallen on hard times, right? She had lost her husband. She's now a widow. The creditors have come to take what her late husband owed to him. And she also has the burden of being a single parent, raising 2 boys. And so it's easy to say that this widow was at the end of her rope. I mean, that's, you can read the story for yourself. I mean, and there's probably been times, well, maybe we have felt like that, or maybe we felt like we just, what do I do now, right? Where do I turn to? Where do I go? Where's my help coming from? That's almost like what she was saying. Hey, I'm here. This is what I got going on. I mean, she wasn't complaining. She was just, hey, this is the facts. This is what I have before me, and I'm looking for help. So that's where Elisha comes in. She went to the man of God for help and for answers. By the way, when hard times comes, it's always the right thing to go to God, right? Now, obviously, she went to the man of God. She went to the prophet and talked to him. This widow didn't go around complaining. She didn't go around just, woe is me, or my life is terrible. She wasn't making excuses. She didn't go on Facebook and talk about how the creditors was making her life worse, right? Or she didn't go get the mob together to stand up for her because the creditors were picking on her and she has a right. No, she just simply went to the man of God. And obviously I ought to say, that's what we do a lot of times today, right? We'll have a hard time, and it may not even be as hard as what she's facing, and instead of going to a pastor or to a Christian, a godly Christian, or instead of going to God and talking to God, man, we want to talk to everybody but God, right? We want to put it on Facebook, or we want to complain and bellyache, and she didn't do that. And so when hardships come, when injustice come, when questions come that we don't have answer to, God is the one to turn to. So that's obviously point number one. Elisha hears her problems. He heard her problems. He heard what was going on. Verse 1 gives us insight on why she is known as the weeping widow. As I already mentioned, her husband was dead. She needed money. She didn't have to pay the creditors, or she didn't have money to pay the creditors, had 2 boys, and she didn't have anything or anyone to help with the situation. So there was desperation. She was desperate, right? It starts out by saying, now there cried a certain woman. The word cry means to moan, to weep uncontrollably, to shriek out of grief. You got to the point where your problem was just so big, so bad, maybe you just cried. Hey, you just, something so much, such a burden, you didn't have the answers, and you just kind of sat there, and maybe you shed a tear or two. Just, you didn't know what to do. You didn't, not necessarily having a pity party, it's just, oh, man, this is hard. I'm going through this. I'm facing that. And this is where she was. This word identifies the sound of a broken heart. This woman comes to Elisha at the lowest moment of her life. She is now raising 2 boys as a single parent. By the way, I think we should be sensitive to single parents, right? Regardless of how somebody became a single parent. I saw a study that said 80% of single parents in America are women. And I believe as a church, sometimes we miss on being a help or miss out on opportunities in helping a single parent. Look, I'm course, sometimes I tell Miss Ashley when I'm picking on her, I'm like, oh, it's difficult being the mom and the dad. I just do it all. You know what I mean? It's so hard on me. I'm married, 4 children. I'm married to my first wife right now. And, you know, I'm sorry, Miss Elaine. I shouldn't have said that. She's my only wife, though, so it's okay. But we're together. Hey, parenting is hard. It's not always easy. Sometimes it is. Not always. You go through ups and downs, ebbs and flows. I can't imagine having to do it as a single parent. Of course, I'm getting a little taste of that this week. Of course, on Mondays and Tuesdays, Miss Ashley works, so I have to get the children to school and back. Normally, it's only one time because when Miss Missy's here, we're carpooling, right? We're smart enough to get together and carpool. Well, Miss Missy's not here, so on Monday and Tuesdays, I'm doing the driving in the mornings, in the afternoons, and by Wednesdays, I've had my fill. You know what I mean? Getting up. Matter of fact, Monday was the first morning, and to my kids' credit, they get up by themselves. All 4 of them wake up by themselves. They pack their own lunch by themselves. If they want something to eat, they get it. I roll out of bed just in time to get in the car and drive them to school. I don't know if that makes me a good or bad parent. I'm just telling you what I do. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just telling you what I do. Usually we leave about 7:30. Ella came in about 7:38 and said, Daddy, taking us to school? You know, we got to go. It's like, yeah, I'm coming. So I got him in the car, got him to school, and I told Ella, I said, hey, thanks for waking me up. Don't ever do it again. You know, let me sleep. But no, so I understand. So I'm getting a little. Of course, Miss Ashley starts in the morning on Monday, Tuesday, or 7. She don't get off at 6, and so. And I mean, and she's there. Of course, she's customer service, so we really can't bother her. I mean, it's just call after call after call. I can't imagine having to do that day in, day out, and not have somebody to at least help, whether it be a spouse or a grandparent or somebody. And that's kind of where this lady is. That's where this widow is. Hey, she's like, hey, not only do I have these debtors, but I'm also a single parent. So I'm just saying, from us, from a church standpoint, right, do we do what we can in helping single parents, whether it's a lady or whether it's a man? And I tell you from my heart, I don't necessarily care how they became a single parent. I just care that they come to church. I don't want them to be here. Hey, bring their children, put them, well, I had a pass. Well, I don't care. I don't care how you got there, but I want you to love you. I want to love you where you are now, right? And if we can help and we can be an encouragement and we can reach out, then we ought to do that. We ought to be like Christ. So I'm sure, she had racked her brain trying to figure out how she's going to manage, how she's going to do everything, how she's going to pay back everything, is she going to work, how is she going to raise these boys. So in her crying, and there was desperation. She was desperate, and Elijah heard of her problems. Not only that, number 2, there was death. You can see that. So there's desperation, and there was death. She was married to one of the sons of the prophets we see in verse 1. Of course, these were the men who were in training under Elisha to be the prophets and the preachers in Israel. Her husband, her friend, her provider, her protector, had been taken away from her in death. And so she is broken because a loved one had been taken away, had died. Now, death is never an easy thing. Death is not something, we've talked about this. It's not something that you sit around and say, hey, let's talk about death. Let's talk about dying. I mean, that's just not a topic that comes up that you want to talk about. And then when you lose a loved one, it can be hard, even when it's someone we love. And even as a Christian, when somebody dies that is a Christian, our response to that should be celebration. Right? We celebrate. Why? Because they're in heaven. They're better off, but there's still some hurt, right? There's still a void. If it's somebody we're close to, if it's a family, it's a friend, they're in heaven and they're better off, but we missed him, and that's natural, and that's understandable, and obviously that's where this lady was. Even the man seemed like a man of God. The Bible says that he feared the Lord. I mean, what a testimony for this man. I mean, he was somebody that was a son of a prophet. He feared the Lord, so he seemed to do what was right. And obviously, she's having to deal with death in her life. But not only that, not only was there desperation and death, we can also see that there was debt as well. Since her husband is dead, he obviously cannot pay the bills, and neither can she. As a result, her creditors are coming to take her sons away as slaves so they can work off the debt. I think that's a good thing maybe I should start doing. If I can't pay off my debt, they can come get one of my children and say, hey, you can come get one, and they can just work it off, or if you got some, just come get my kid, they'll work it off. But that's what they did here under Jewish law. That was allowed under Jewish law. And so she's without her husband, and now it's looking like she's about to lose her sons. I mean, that's kind of being in a rock and a hard place, right? Hey, I'm desperate. I don't have anything. I don't know how I'm going to get out of here. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this pit that I'm in. My husband's dead, and now I'm about to lose my sons. Now, I know we just did Financial Sunday, I believe a couple of Sundays ago, and the preacher preached on that. But I think this would be a good moment, since it's here in this passage, to mention, don't go in debt for things you can't afford. Now, we don't know the story here. We don't get the backstory. How did they get in debt? I don't know. What was it? Was it him? Was it her? We don't really know. What we do know is that they were there. Now, and so we could see that. If your outflow is more than your inflow, then your upkeep is going to be your downfall, right? If your outflow, in other words, if you're spending more than you're taking in, your upkeep is going to be your downfall. That's what debt does to you. And so I think it's without saying, hey, be smart when it comes to money. In September, MoneyWise did an article and said Americans as a whole, we are $16.15 trillion in debt. I can't even wrap my mind around that, to be quite honest. I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about just Americans, just individuals. You added up $16.15 trillion in debt. If you want to add problems to your life, adding debt will do that. It just will. When you are in debt, you are enslaved to that debt. It will bring burdens that you don't know you need. A couple years ago, someone stole my credit card. However, I didn't even report it. I just let it go because they were spending less than what Miss Ashley does. I thought they can have it. I'm just kidding. That didn't really happen. And honestly, I spend more than Miss Ashley, if we want the truth about it. But people do that, right? People get a credit card, or they see something they want, don't plan for it, and they just get it. Maybe that's, even though he was a man that feared God, maybe he did that. Maybe there's the newest hut that just came out, and he had to have it, and that's where they had to live. Maybe it had a waterfront property. I don't know. But somehow he went in debt, and that's what we do today a lot of times. We see something, and man, we just got to have it, and we'll go in debt getting it. And then a hard time, like a passing of a loved one, or we lose a job, or just whatever may happen. And then one problem is a bigger problem because, man, we just put that debt on top of us. And that's what this lady is going through. And so we got to be careful about going in debt for things. And of course, I mentioned this under the Jewish law. It was okay, or it was allowed to come get the sons to work off that debt. And then I thought, maybe that's what we start doing as Americans, right? If somebody can't pay their credit card, come get the person who put the charge on the credit card and make them work it off. You think that would solve some problems? Like, hey, I charged this in my credit card last month, but I can't afford it this month. Well, we got some concrete out here we need to pour by tomorrow. Come pour concrete. I think people would start being smart about their money, don't you? Because then it's starting to get real. But just be smart when it comes to money. These verses are designed to teach us that our problems, while they may appear to be huge in our eyes, they're just opportunities in disguise for God, right? I mean, to this lady, you put yourself in this story. You're a single parent, 2 children, you have this debt you can't pay, creditors about to come take your children. Then that's a hard situation. And that's what she was going through. But to God, it's just another opportunity for him to show us who he is. For here in this story, it was just another opportunity. So therefore, no matter what you are called on to face in this life, you need to learn to turn to God, turn to the Lord first for your help. Hebrews 4:16, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in a time of need. So, yes, there was debt. Yes, there was death and desperation, and she had problems, but she's going to the one who can solve her problems. So not only does Elisha hear her problems, number 2, Elisha sees potential. Elisha starts with 2 questions in verse 2. What do you need and what do you have? Now most people, maybe this would even be me, if I just poured out my heart to Elisha and told him everything that was going on, I'd want Elisha to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do to fix your problem. But he didn't do that, right? He'd be like, no, he asked 2 questions, right? Well, what do you need and what do you have? Both these questions, by these questions, this widow was made to see the size of her need and the smallness of her own resources. She needed everything and she had very little. She possibly could not meet her own needs. Often God will use the trials, heartaches, and burdens of life to bring us to the place where we can honestly see our need and our own inability to meet it. Think about it. As long as we think we can handle things, why do we need God? Right? Now, we may not say that out loud. Oh, Brother Billy, I would never say it. But a lot of times we say that with our actions. If we think we can be in control of things, and we think we can handle every situation that comes our way, then our actions show that we won't lean on God as much. And I've said this before, a lot of times we wind up treating God like a fire escape. Well, when do you use the fire escape? When there's a fire, right? That's when you want to use it. And so sometimes we'll do that. Hard times will come, and what do we start doing? Man, we start praying. We start going to God. I find it amazing. If you know anything about sports or have kept up with anything, especially NFL, Monday Night Football, it's been 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, Damar Hamlin was a football player for the Buffalo Bills. They were in the middle of a game, and my man had a heart attack playing the game of football. Matter of fact, it's never seen anything like it. He literally died on the field. I mean, he quit breathing. His heart quit beating. Of course, it's funny talking to my children about that. Buffalo was playing this week. Of course, it's been 3 weeks, and my daughter asked, is the guy who had a heart attack, like, is he playing? I'm like, okay, he died. I don't think he's going to be playing 3 weeks later. Like, it's a little more than stubbing your toe or even breaking an ankle. Like, his heart quit beating, right? And even my son's been asking, well, what's he doing? I was like, oh, and as my son, I was like, well, do you think you could play if you had died? He said, I don't know. I've never died before. And so, okay, good point. But what amazed me about the whole situation, of course, ESPN did a good job of handling it. I mean, how do you handle a situation like that? And of course, what I took in, of course, when you didn't know what was going on, I was watching the players, right? When somebody's injured, if you look at the player's face, you can tell the seriousness or lack of just by their reactions. And their reactions, even though you couldn't see Damar, their reactions were, this is serious. This is more than just, a hurt knee or, an Achilles. Like, this is serious. But what was amazing was a prayer meeting broke out at the Cincinnati-Buffalo game. And I'm not talking about just the players. There were football players on the field praying. There was videos of people in stands praying. I'm talking about like not just a quiet prayer. I'm talking about there's videos of people leading a whole section in prayer. Later on, even maybe the next day on sports news and different things, a guy just said, "Hey, I feel led to pray," and he prayed on air. And I mean, all of a sudden, it was okay to pray. Like, well, wait. I thought I've been told it's not okay to pray. Oh, wait, now it is okay to pray, right? And it's amazing. You had grown men praying and crying. I mean, those football players are literally millionaires. I mean, they can afford anything, but they didn't turn to their money. They didn't turn to their wealth. They didn't turn to how athletic they are. What did they do? Man, they turned to prayer. They turned to God. And for the next 24, 48 hours, however, couple of days, man, everybody was praying for Damar Hamlin. And it was amazing. Well, why do we do that? Why, as a nation? I can think back to 9/11, when 9/11 happened, right? Man, and everybody, matter of fact, you look at, I'm sure there's probably some figures out there, but look, there was a church boom after that. Everybody was going to church. Everybody was praying. It's okay. Why do we do that? Because it's almost like we're conditioned, hey, when hard times come, then we run to God. Well, no, we should be going to God regardless if hard times are coming, right? And I believe this woman was. I don't believe she waited till a hard time. Once again, we see her husband. She was a son of a prophet, so I imagine there was godly leadership in a home. I imagine she was a part of that, right? But Elisha saw her, and he saw more than just the pot of oil sitting there. He sees potential. And often God will use trials. He'll use heartaches. And he will use burdens sometimes to draw us back to him. I've heard many people say they've gotten hurt or were in a situation and all they could do was lay on their back and look up. You know, and I pray that we don't have to get to that point for God to get our attention. Right? I don't, you know, it's kind of like I tell my children, you know, do what I tell you. Don't wait till I have to get your attention. If I get out of this recliner, I know I like sitting in my recliner. It's not going to be good for you, you know? And so, hey, just obey. And sometimes I think that's what God does. Hey, don't make me punish you. Just obey. Just do what I've called you to do. But when we stop and honestly answer these two questions, we will realize that we need more than we'll ever be able to supply ourselves. Verse 2 lets us know that all she had was that pot of oil. My bad. Elisha saw potential there even when she didn't. Do you ever come to God and feel like all you have to offer him is just pot of oil? Like, God, I would, this is it. This is all I have to offer. Matter of fact, even studying out oil, Faith, and the Bible times, there was value, and some historians and some theologians even said that it was possible she only had this because she was keeping it for her funeral. She only had it because when she died, she'd use it there because they would use that for that time, and so, you know, there's a little profit there in having oil or that thereof. I don't know if it was essential oils or not for everybody a part of that. But either way, it was, you know, they got oils now that cure everything, right? You know, if you got arthritis and you use that oil, or if you want your house to smell like lavender and it soothes you just like the candle and, you know, whatever. So anyway, but that's what she had, and some believe that she had it for when she was going to pass away. But Elisha saw potential there even when she didn't. Matthew 17:20, and Jesus said to them, because of your unbelief, for verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. What about when the disciples had to feed over 5,000 people? John 6:9, there's a lad here which had 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? And in John 6:11, we see the answer, and Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them, sat down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would. I heard someone say, man's extremity is God's opportunity. Our extremities are God's opportunities. When we feel like all we have to offer God is maybe a couple fishes, a couple loaves of bread, or we feel like all we have is just a little pot of oil and that's all we have to offer God, we feel like it's not much, but God just wants us to be willing to give it to Him, right? We just have to answer the question, what do we have? Give what we can, and God will do the rest. Why? Where we don't see much, there's great potential when God is in it. Let's just see what you have, great or small, and it starts with our faith. What we fail to realize is that God has already given us everything we need for our need to be met. That widow said that the only thing of value she had was that pot of oil, yet you have, and I have so much more than just a mere pot of oil. And what does God want us to do? He wants us to steward that. He wants us to have faith in this, saying, use what I have. All Elisha tells her to do is go to your neighbors, ask for vessels to borrow, not just a few, but a lot. Take them home, get your boys, and start pouring the oil in those vessels, and then they are full, right? And so what she saw as nothing, just a little pot of oil, Elisha saw it and said, wait, you have something there. And so thirdly, we see that God provides. And you can see that in verses 5 through 7. The woman and her sons, after they got the vessels, filled one vessel after another into every vessel they had borrowed was full. She began that day with nothing. She ended it with everything. And that is what our God can do for us. Elisha knew that God would match her faith even when she didn't feel like she didn't have anything to give. God provides when we live our faith out. Elisha told her to go. She went. Told her to borrow. She did just that. Told her to shut the door with the boys. She did just that. A lot of times, I believe we don't see God providing because we can't even obey the simple tasks, the simple things. Once again, I tell my children, and I have a child in here, she can back everything I say. Of course, she never gets in trouble, so she's the perfect. No, she does get in trouble. I tell my children sometimes, if I can't trust you with the little things, I can't trust you with the big things. Hey, if you can't do the small things, I tell you, hey, I tell you something to do, hey, just do it. And it's not something extreme, but if I can't trust them in something small, then I'm not going to trust them in something big. My mama still reminds me the first time she left myself and my next door best friend at my home alone by ourselves. We had a great time. We had a great day. In Alabama, you can buy real fireworks. Yes, not these in Arizona that don't really do anything. And we had a lot of fireworks for whatever reason, because we're rednecks and we blow stuff up, I guess. And I mean, it wasn't July the 4th, it wasn't nothing. And man, we spent a lot of that day shooting fireworks. And we had a big front porch and a little 2-lane road in front of us. Temple Avenue ran right in front of it. And we even got the idea, we had a little chair out there. We got a piece of wood, probably about that long, maybe about 6 inches. We could light a bottle rocket and aim it with that board propped up on that chair as cars were going by. Shoo! And man, we had fun. And man, I mean, one time one went up under a car, one popped in front of a car. I remember one guy turned around, and it's bad because we live right beside a church. Like, I ain't talking about like I'm talking about like I could throw a rock and hit the church. You know what I mean? It was right there. And this one car, I remember turning around, so I jetted. I ran inside, and I'm looking out the window, and my best friend, he just stayed on the porch, and we had 2 swings. He just got on the swing, and he's just swinging by himself, like nothing going on here. car rode by, and he just kind of waved and kept swinging. And I say I ought to say, my mama probably shouldn't have left me home by myself. She couldn't trust me in the little things. Right? It was something small. Hey, I'm working. We leave here, and I was older. It wasn't like I was young. I mean, I think I was 13, 14. So obviously I knew better, and had to spend a lot of the afternoon cleaning up a bunch of fireworks all around the yard. Of course, we didn't tell her everywhere it was, because then we'd have to clean more. But, it's the little things. God is the same way with us. Can He trust us in the little things? Can we steward in the little things? We say, do you trust God? You're like, yes, I trust God. You believe He can do anything. Yes, I believe He can do anything. You say, is He all powerful? Is He all knowing? Can you fix any problem you have? And everybody here would say, yes, I believe. Then why don't we trust Him with our life? Why don't we trust Him with our money? Why don't we trust Him with the talents that He has given us? Right? Our faith is more than just talking about it. Our faith is an action faith. It's living out our faith and showing others about it. Look, if you're not going to trust God with the small things, then you're not going to trust God with the big things. Now, I tell people, and I'll continue to tell people, because we talk about giving and we talk about tithing, and that is a biblical principle that the Bible teaches, and we tell people, it's like, if you're not willing to give when you have $10, then you're not going to be willing to give when you have $1,000. It don't just automatically change, and I'm not talking about giving the whole thing. I'm just telling you, if you don't have a giving heart when you have little, then you're not going to have a giving heart when you have much. Because you're the same person, you just have more. And I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about stewarding just things in general life. You may say, well, I'm not too talented here, or I can't do that, or I only just have just this little pot of oil. I can't do much. But if you're not willing to give it to God, and you're not willing to show your faith in the small things, then you can't expect God to give you big things. Why? Because you can't trust Him in a little thing. So Elisha promised that the Lord would fill the vessels for her, and He did. God will keep His promises to us as well. God's provision has no limits. God is able to meet every need, move every mountain, solve every problem that we have. His provision is limited by nothing but our faith. That's, you know what God's limited by? By our lack of faith, by not fully trusting in Him and believing He will take care of us. And once again, God will supply all your needs, not all your wants. I don't know about y'all, but I got a big want list. Man, there's things that I want. Maybe I have it, maybe I won't. I've told this before. I always pick on, especially with Cooper, I pick on him because I tell him, like, man, I wish I had a motorcycle and a truck and a boat, and I always blame Mommy, right? It's her fault. That's why I can't. It's Mommy's fault. I was like, son, I would, but Mommy won't let me have any of these things. And one day Cooper we was talking, and Ashley was sitting there, and somewhere in the conversation, Cooper said, if Mommy died, we could get all these things. And Miss Ashley's like, seriously, son? Like, I'm right here, And as a matter of fact, they were talking about it today. I picked them up or taking them to school, or maybe yesterday, and the one, I don't know which one was talking about, like, I can't, Mommy won't let Daddy have anything. Well, Daddy's older. He's the oldest one in the family. So apparently, because you're older, you're the boss, I guess. And, he's the oldest one. He can get, so we always go back and forth. So I'm just saying, I have a want list. God never promised you He'll take care of your wants. But He does promise that He'll take care of your need. Hey, you got a need, you go to God, He'll take care of it. And here's the thing. He may not take care of it the way you think it ought to be taken care of. For this widow, she may have been thinking, man, I just want Elisha to say, hey, this is what you got to do. Pray 3 times a day and tomorrow it'll be taken care of. Or maybe, just, hey, I'll talk to God and it'll be taken. I don't know what she was expecting. And sometimes maybe we're expecting that. But once again, we got to live out our faith. And when we do that, God will supply our needs and He will take care of us. God stands ready to give all that you make room in your life for.
no more, no less. When the day was done, there was enough oil in those borrowed vessels to settle her debts, meet her desires, and to supply for her family. And God will do the same thing today. So what do we learn from these? Number one, trust in the Lord with your problems. If you don't have problems, you will. They come and go. You know what's the saying? You're either in a storm, you're coming out of a storm, or you're about to face a storm. And I know storms come in all kind of shapes and sizes. I think sometimes our storms ain't as big as what we make them out to be. Just if you think about the world, me having a flat tire on my second vehicle and makes me late is really not a storm in my opinion. That's not a storm. It's an inconvenience. Oh, it's the worst day. No, it's just a flat tire. Let me get the spare, throw it on there. You know, we're good. That's the inconvenience. So I say that to say sometimes we're comfortable in our American Christianity, and sometimes we just, it's problems. But nevertheless, we still face hard times. We still face storms. We face sickness. We face death, right? Maybe even debt. And maybe like the lady in her problems, she was desperate. But what do? We trust God in that. God, I'm giving to you. And all that. Secondly, trust God with your resources. No matter how big or how small, just trust God with your resources. Right? God's not sitting up in heaven just saying, hey, I'm waiting for them to trust me with their resources, and then I'm going to flip it on them and make it bad. No, that's not who God is. That's not who we serve. Just trust Him. Trust Him with your resources. And when I say resources, that's financially. That's whatever talents you may have, whether big or small, whether you think you can do a little or not much at all. Hey, just trust God with what you have. And then thirdly, trust the Lord with your eternity as well. Right? Just, God, I believe in you. I know you're going to take care of me. You're going to take care of me here on earth, but you're also going to take care of me in the afterlife as well. And so like this widow, we can wake up seeming all is lost, going through hard times, facing problems, facing troubles. But if we simply trust God with the little things, then He will take care of us and He'll supply our needs. If you would stand, we'll close in prayer tonight. I do appreciate y'all being here. Don't forget to be here for Sunday morning services. Everything's carry on like usual. I'm going to ask Brother Phil Lacombe if he would close us in prayer tonight.